The Battle of Salaita Hill took place in 1916 in Kenya. The British wanted to keep control of shipping lanes along the Indian Ocean, which then led to the Suez Canal, and they also wanted to protect the British territories in Africa. The Germans, they had a few territories which we now call Tanzania, Rwanda and Burundi. And their aim was to frustrate the British campaign in Europe by drawing as many resources away to the East Africa campaign. Now, I've taken an interest to this story because I don't have a very common surname. And one of the victims who's buried there is obviously related to me somehow, but I haven't worked out how yet. Before the Battle of Salaita Hill, which was a significant small hill in a flat lying area, which then would give a significant vantage point, there was another battle called the Battle of Tonga. Tonga is a town in Tanzania, and this battle had a great bearing on the Battle of Salaita Hill. The Battle of Tonga happened in 1914, and it also became known as the Battle of the Bees. And the reason for this is somehow some of the soldiers disturbed a big beehive, and soldiers from both sides scattered. And for a time they were both away from both sides, but the Germans got back first. As a result, the Germans were able to claim many tents, rations, machine guns, and up to 600,000 rounds of ammunition that were seized from the enemy. And this greatly strengthened them for later battles, including the Battle of Salaita Hill. Around 40,000 British colony soldiers were involved in the East Africa campaign, and this included soldiers from Britain, South Africa, India, and Rhodesia, which we now call Zimbabwe. The Germans, led by General von Lettow-Vorbeck, used 3,500 Europeans and about 12,000 Askari. So he used the locals who knew the terrain and who were more adapted to the weather. And he basically used guerrilla warfare, and he was very successful at holding down a much bigger force. An interesting thing happened at the Battle of the Bees. One of the ladies whose husband was killed took exception to this. She didn't like her husband being killed by the British at the Battle of the Bees. So when it came to the Battle of Salaita Hill, she decided to take revenge. She apparently had a machine gun, and she took hiding in a tree, a big baobab tree, and I'm going to put some photos here. Mama Sukarini was her name, and she took pot shots at any soldiers that she could from the British side. And you can tour this area, and people will show you around some of the trenches and the sniper tree and so on. One of the reasons why the British lost was because they relied on faulty intelligence. At Salaita Hill, there were trenches that were dug up high, but they were dummy trenches. Now, you've got to remember, this is in 1916. Aeroplanes were still pretty new. But apparently, the generals from the British side were told, look, this is a very fortified hill, don't attack it. We've done a flyover. The generals obviously didn't listen. They bombarded the trenches with the artillery, but it was all in vain because they were dummy trenches up higher. The Germans launched a very successful counterattack and were able to take out many soldiers. Many of these are buried in the nearby town called Tavita. When I reflect on this battle, it makes me sad to think how futile war is, and how young men quite often are promised, you'll get a free farm when you go home, or this or that, are slaughtered for the egos of the wealthy. War is a terrible thing. But we must reflect on this, and we must learn from this. Anyway, it's an interesting story, and I thought the Battle of the Bees and the sniper tree were particularly funny aspects, although it's a very sad story overall.